Welcome, everybody. It's Friday. That means, thank goodness, it's Kubernetes, episode number 140. I'm going to be your host today, Jorge Castro, my very first TGIK. After helping run things in the background here, this is what I look like. This is my face. And join with another person's first time here co-hosting, and hopefully not last. Wink, wink. If you think Jeremy is a great presenter and has great knowledge, maybe we can convince him to come back. Jeremy Ricard, please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Jeremy. I was the Kubernetes 120 lead, so you may have seen me sending emails about dates and stuff. This is what I look like. I work at VMware. I work on an internal VMware platform for people shipping SaaS services and stuff. So doing a lot of like operations stuff, SRE kind of work, and then building some components on top of it for to make it easier for people to use.
Awesome. And if you're new to the show, welcome. Say that you're new to the show in chat. One thing we do is let us know where you're listening in from, because we do like to say hello. Jeremy, where are you from? Where are you listening in from here?
I am from Colorado. Or I'm in Colorado, but I'm from Michigan originally. So
excellent. And I'm from Michigan. Yeah,
the SIG mitten going on now.
Yeah, trivia for the group. Someone from Michigan is named a Michigander. That's a weird one. So let's see who's around. Lamadi and Waleed, I cannot tell you how happy it is that you are here after years of being together, having both of you here with this show. I really appreciate that. Joe's here from Seattle, I'm guessing. Marco Chepi, I know where a lot of people are from already. Marco Chepi's listening in from DC. Eric, welcome, Dallas Fort Worth. Sevi, hello. Let's see who's there. Ooh, I guess, did you do music, Paul, for the intro? That's fancy. Yeah. Alison Downey's here. She's from London in the UK. Just moved there from New Zealand. Hello. Who else have we got going on here? Martin says, good evening from the Netherlands. Awesome. I knew someone was going to point out your 9 Inch Nail shirt, Jeremy. I told you it was going to be great. Dan from the podcast is here. Welcome, Dan. Let's see, KR4 from Scottsdale, Sema from Paris, Borko from Ottawa, Canada. Juka, did I say that right? Hi from Helsinki. I hope I got that one right. Michael from Phoenix, Robert from Poland, Ashutosh, I hope I got that one right, from the UK. Wow, oh my goodness. Sebastian from Kirkland, Washington. Here comes Marky Jackson. Marky, you just moved to San Diego, right? Massimiliano from Italy. Mohammed from Paris. Red Panther from Texas. Oh, my goodness. Wow, so many people showed up. I guess we're going to have to do a good job today, Jeremy. Let's see, Bonafide from North Dakota. Keep telling us where you're from, and we will periodically come to the group and make sure we shout out. We are very proud of the diverse set of people and listeners that we always get, and just really put some excitement into it. I know it's Friday. We've been working hard. We are some of us are about to go on holidays soon. So we did want to shake things up here a little bit. So one of the things we noticed, and we're going to cover this, things like the Docker shim. I know we've already had people asking questions, and we do have the release. So Jeremy was the release manager for 1.20. And one of the things I've noticed during this last tail end of the year, when it comes to technical content, when it comes to people explaining things about Kubernetes, right? We come on the show, you see terminals, and we break clusters, and we have years worth of funny moments where we're doing tech things and things are working and not working. One thing we haven't done, and because I'm a community manager, disclaimer, not an engineer, that's why I brought Jeremy with me, is one of the things I would love to help socialize is not just the technical aspects of Kubernetes, but how the project works and is organized. So those of you that are using Kubernetes professionally or whatever, it's great to know how the kubelet acts and things like that and all that kind of good tech stuff. But it's also great to have in your toolbox the processes that Kubernetes does, so that when you have that information, you're able to make better technical decisions. So we thought about, hey, the release just happened. It is shipped. There are certain things that we discovered as I watched the Docker shim news spread over the internet that we could probably do a better job explaining how things work around here. So what do y'all think about that? Let's see. Did we get a thumbs up of that? Otherwise, we're spinning up a cluster. No, we're not spinning up a cluster today. So hey, Youssef from Morocco. Awesome. All right. So the way the show works, if your first time, we do the news for a little bit. We kind of talk about some things that are happening around the Kubernetes community. And then we'll go into our topic, which is our favorite things in 1.20. And then Jeremy is going to give us like that insight into what it's like to release this thing. And hopefully by the end, you will not just know where this stuff comes from, but my goal here is for you to learn how the release manager does some of the things. Because as many of you know, volunteers make this project happen. And the release team is one of the best places to shadow and to dive into the project. So we're going to do our best to, to do that justice. So let's get started. First of all,
let's crank that font.
Let's crank. Oh, am I cranking up the font? All right. How's that?
I think that's better.
All right. So first of all, Jeremy, it has been a busy week. Last 2 weeks ago. Wait, last Tuesday.
Yeah. Last Tuesday.
So this week we only have a point release. I don't have much to say here other than congratulations. We'll get into 1.20 itself, but yeah, there's a 1.17.16 point release. If you don't know, each of our releases have a changelog directory, and they will tell you the differences as well since the last point release. So you can check those out here, and there are links and everything that you need. So that is a useful site there, and we will get to an even more useful site where we can dig into that. Big news this week, Jeremy, and we're going to start with you here is, all right, what does this mean?
Yeah, so I think it's scarier than when it came up in the release notes. I think it's scarier than what it actually is. So
yeah,
the word deprecation comes in, and I think people are like, is that going to immediately impact me? And the short answer is not immediately. Mm-hmm. There's a whole bunch of processes about how features graduate and then how they go away in Kubernetes, and it's you can find the documentation for all of this, but essentially when something becomes deprecated, you have 3 releases before it goes away. So in 1.20. What's happening is a piece of code is being deprecated from the kubelet. Docker, was kind of the original container runtime, was kind of really tightly integrated into the kubelet. Then I think in 1.5, support for container runtime interfaces came in. And when that happened, the kubelet was updated to use these CRI implementations using that API. Docker didn't implement one of those things because it predates CRI, right? Like CRI stuff came after Docker was a thing. Docker at the time didn't go back and build a CRI implementation because Containerd is really that implementation. Containerd came out of Docker, became the CRI implementation. So a lot of people have been using it forever, though. Like this Docker shim piece that's in kubelet, and really what's happening here is that it's going to be removed, and it's going to be removed for a couple of reasons. One, CRI is getting ready to start moving through that graduation process. In 1.20, it moves to beta so that it can start to go to GA after that. That really means it's ready to use, and it's been ready to use for a while. The second thing is that the Docker shim code, like the path, if you look through the kubelet code, it's just an extra set of things to maintain. When bugs are found, it's just extra stuff that has to be maintained. So it's time for it to go. So really what's happening here is that you're just getting notice. So starting in 1.20, when the kubelet starts up, you'll get a warning message. That's really the extent of it. And I think this blog post is really, really good. Definitely recommend people go and read it. It gives you all of the details, all what to look out for. Get you on that journey to start using Containerd or Cryo or Docker's or Mirantis is going to build a CRI implementation around Docker.
I wanted to link to that there because even if you want to stick with what you got, Mirantis definitely has a project here, CRI-Docker-D. So, Jeremy, I'm going to tell you what I learned from this. Being one of the persons that had to stay up really late to get this blog out. So one thing I've noticed is I feel like a lot of people have conflated the word Docker. There's Docker, there's capital D Docker, as in Docker Inc., there's the Docker CLI. And I think when people just look at that part of the stack, they kind of say all Docker. Because I actually did meet someone who was like, is Docker on my Mac still going to work? Right. And it was like, huh? Right. And I think it also kind of shows how we need to keep an eye on what developers themselves see us right in the other way. Right. Like you can't just be like, it's not their fault. They don't know all the intricacies of Kubernetes. Like, we don't want you to know this stuff, right? do tell me this though, when it comes to what is the difference between just to be explicit here, deprecation and removal are two different things. That's also something I think we conflate. What are the current timelines for each one? Like, is there a rule? Like, if you announce something, do I always get the same amount of time? Is there a policy?
Yeah,
how does removal work?
There's a policy generally around REST API things and other core things that make up the project. And when something becomes deprecated, there are three releases before it's removed. So there will be, probably in 123, I think, is when that's going to happen. So you'll have time. You'll be able to migrate over. I think a really important thing, going back to like the conflation of all terms is, when people think of like Docker, they're thinking of the image probably, the thing that you're deploying. There's tools, there's all kinds of stuff. But when you think of like, I'm going to deploy this Docker image or this Docker container to my cluster, really it's an OCI image now. That became a spec as well. So there are other runtimes that can run those same things. And that's going to continue to work. The thing you have been building will still work going forward using Containerd or Cryo.
Yeah. And I found opencontainers.org is a website. Let me just, I have the browser now, Joe. I'm the captain. Here we go. I learned a lot about this, where you're like, oh, dude, this is there's like a standard around this and people collaborate and stuff. Like you're not going to wake up one day and the format changes. Like there's actually a process and a mailing list and all of that kind of stuff. And I feel like maybe some people weren't aware of this. And I think if anything, having people be aware that runtime spec and image spec and stuff are a thing, probably, makes a lot of people feel a little bit more confident about it. I literally had a friend from NASA email me and he was like, what are you doing? This doesn't affect me, but what are you doing? And I was like, whoa, yeah, I should, words can be difficult. So that's good. And like we said, if you still want to roll with what you got, CRI Docker D is there, maintained by the Mirantis folks. And less things for us to put in core. Always a good day when we remove something in core. So we didn't have a TGIK last week. And the reason was this because Kubernetes had its contributor celebration. If you've gone to a KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, a few days before, the contributors get together. Basically twice a year is the only time that contributors have face-to-face meetings, get to know each other, have that kind of stuff. So with COVID, we weren't able to have that. So we did a contributor celebration instead, where we just had a bunch of fun. And there's some links that I wanted to show some people here. There was the Great Cloud Native Bake Off, which was literally a virtual cooking competition. Paul Czar, who's helping us stream here today, helped put this together. And the panel was fantastic. The cakes were fantastic. A famous cook from the Travel Channel came to say hello and couldn't pronounce Kubernetes because that's just how we roll. So that's really good. We also had 2 sessions of the Most Excellent Kubernetes Challenge, which was a party trivia game from the folks from DevOpsPartyGames.com that came, and that was a good time. And we have all that stuff on YouTube. And we have our contributor awards. These are peer awards that the Kubernetes SIG co-chairs and leads nominate folks for. And it's just like an important thing that we take seriously, celebrating people's achievements and things like that. So that's definitely on there. And I'm one of the presenters, so I had to wear a jacket. It was uncomfortable. And then the last bit, Dan and Rob put together a tour of CI in Kubernetes, which is kind of an inside look on how the project runs CI. It's all public, so it's not inside on purpose, but it's like a really great tour if you've ever wondered about CI, how the project does that. So that kind of
I thought that was awesome. Just I wanted to give my extra recommendation. You should go watch that video because it was super useful. If you've ever wondered why something's flaking or trying to dig through what is test grid, there's so much really, really cool information inside of there.
Yeah. So that's what's happening in core. We always I do the notes usually for the hosts on the week, and I try to do core stuff and then ecosystem stuff to kind of keep them organized here. Let's look in the chat. Who've I missed? Oh my goodness, the chat is hopping today. Do you think we'll do better than one of Joe's episodes?
I don't know. There's a lot of people. It's pretty impressive.
That is all right.
Thank you so much to everybody who's watching.
Eric says Docker became the Kleenex of containers.
That is so true.
Yeah, the Xerox. Yeah, exactly. The photocopy. Let's see who else is there. really interesting. With the release cycle change of 21. Hey, so we have the release manager here. So if you have any questions, hit them up in chat. We did 3 releases this year. Why? Let's get into this one. Why 3 releases this year?
So I think the reason we had 3 releases this year was just 2020 was so unprecedented. it was a year, right? Like a lot of bad things happened to a lot of people, a lot of just uncertainty, and it was hard. So when 119 was happening, we kind of took the temperature of the community. It was interesting. I got to be a shadow for the lead of that release. Got to be involved in a bunch of discussions and conversations, and there was actually a lot of a lot of feelings from the community, STIG leads, chairs, people, just contributors in general, asking why are we even doing a release this time? Like what's going to happen? Can we just do a bug fix release? Can we just not do anything right now? Yeah. And I think there's no great answer. I think depending, no matter what we did, there were going to be people that agreed and disagreed, but what we ended up doing was lengthening the process, just to make it, to address a couple of things. One, we wanted to make the code freeze period longer, just to make sure we were delivering something that was stable. As people are upgrading and doing, version bumps, it would really suck during 2020 to add extra anxiety and stress by like releasing something that was kind of hard to use. We explicitly asked people not to put in any hard breaking changes, like when 116 happened and a lot of APIs went away. That would be difficult. So we explicitly asked people minimize the things that would show up in this. No, really, you must pay attention before you upgrade. Right. And then, as the release was unfolding, we also wanted to give time for KubeCon, just to have a break in there for that, just relieve pressure and stress. Yeah. As we got towards the end of the release, we ended up delaying a little bit more because CI was not in a great space. So shout out to Dan and Rob again. We worked really closely with SIG testing and a whole bunch of other groups to make the CI more reliable and just give us a better signal overall. That led to a really long code freeze, which I think queued up a lot of stuff for 120. 120 is actually the biggest release that has happened in a long time. There were 45 things tracked for it, including 3 deprecations. Normally, like 117 was a kind of corresponding release last year, and there were only 22 things in that release. So it's kind of twice as large. There had been conversations about whether 4 releases or 3 releases for the year was really the right thing to do. Do we need to slow it down? Do we need to speed it up? And I think that that hasn't been decided yet. So the original question was, what's going to happen in 121 will the cycles change? Yep. And you're going to see some communications on that coming out really soon. There is an open issue on GitHub that's actually been converted to a discussion that Stephen Augustus opened. It's got a lot of feedback. There seems to be a really strong preference to 3 releases. That does a couple of things. Like the support policy is 3 releases right now, so that kind of extends things out to a year just by default. It takes the pressure off of the release team. It's a very hectic thing to do the release. There's so much stuff that has to happen in kind of a short time frame. So no decision has been made yet, but you're going to see some comms coming out pretty soon, and there will be a decision made probably in early January.
And how does it? I've been on the release team myself. How does I envision, especially as a release, like, does it look like a NASA room where someone's like, go, no go flight? Like, or like, does everyone have the little headphones and it's just like, no,
so really, we know a couple days beforehand. Okay. So this time around, actually the Friday before the release, we were getting a little sketchy because there were some tests checked in around a new feature called API Priority and Fairness. It's not new, but it's graduating to beta this time around. And as part of their getting ready for GA and a subsequent release, they started to add more end-to-end testing. And it turned out those tests weren't great tests in the sense that you couldn't really get the throughput you wanted. So like what APF does is really allow you to classify requests, like go into the admin server, or admin requests go into the API server. And you can say like, I need at least 70 requests per second to be handled for this type of request. And it just turned out like in the CI infrastructure, it was very flaky whether we could hit those or not. Yeah. So we ended up working with those contributors to back that test out for 120 because it wasn't really necessary, but it was giving us really bad signal. And like, one of the go no go things is you're looking at CI signal. Have we been green for the last couple of days? And at that point, we definitely hadn't. There were other things in the mix too that kind of hid that one. It was checked in like way before committed way before we found it, but there were other problems kind of leading up to that week. But definitely it is like a go no go on a Zoom meeting. Like we're all in Zoom, so the day of release we do that final go no go. But I think we know generally a few days beforehand, and it's just kind of making sure that things are good.
Yeah. Real quick, Chaco says, y'all need to add something to the notes. Actually, Paul, if you could post this in tgik.io/notes. We'll always send you to the notes, and we always commit these to our GitHub repo, which we have a link in here somewhere. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. So feel free to come in and help us crowdsource the notes. There are some good things in 1.20 that you just started to talk about, and I want to get to. But let's bust out the quick thing. So sure. Jeremy, you were recently on Google's Kubernetes podcast, and we listened to that, and I kind of wanted to make sure that we were covering the same things. So if you want to listen to definitely way more Jeremy than me, definitely check that out. And you also did something called the Cloud Native Kitchen. What is this about? Yeah,
so there was this free conference this week. It was pretty cool. Like if you're looking for stuff to look at over the next weeks or so, if you're taking break at all, it was a free conference, and a lot of people actually did it from their kitchen. So I did with Ellison. I think
do you have a hat?
I do. Hat? It's upstairs. The speaker gifts were an awesome chef hat and an apron. Okay. But Allison and I did like an Iron Chef style deployment contest where we got when the thing started, Jeff told us the thing you're going to go deploy. So we had 20 minutes to go and make that. It was super fun. But there are a whole bunch of great talks in that. So they're all available for free if you want to go back and look at any of them. I think there's such good content coming from like a bunch of people in the ecosystem. A lot of Kubernetes things, stuff about OPA, other things that are kind of in the space.
Yeah. And next we have for you another interview. I was purposely looking for interviews and YouTube vids, because if you're going to the holidays while you're taking some time off work, drinking eggnog, give you something easy listening for the background there. But Sarah Novotny, someone I've considered one of my mentors, did an interview with Dan here on the podcast, and probably a nice succinct history of Kubernetes. And if you've never quite understood why we're always talking about community and why that is, you will not find a better person to explain it to you. I've listened to it 3 times. I even booked a call with her this morning to talk about all the stuff she talked about, because it was really great. And that's something that I hope everyone here gets a chance to listen to. She's always a great listen, and I guarantee you will learn something about something.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. And I hear OpenFOSS celebrated their 4th birthday party, so that's on YouTube there. So hat tip, Alex. The next one we got here, this was interesting, Jeremy. I did not know that you were all up into Spring and things like that, but this is an article we found about Spring Boot on Kubernetes with build packs and scaffold. Do you want to comment on this one real quick here?
Yeah, I think it's a cool overview of making it a little easier to use some of these tools with Java. I mean, the Spring Boot is probably one of the biggest kind of frameworks that people use. We actually have a whole bunch of tenants that are Java based, and almost all of them are using Spring Boot. It's funny, like I'll look through stack traces and stuff and see stuff. So this is it's walking you through how to use that, how to use scaffold with that, and the build pack support that's built into it. So just making it much easier to get your code running in a cluster without having to worry about how the image is going to be built. Build packs are taking care of that for you. How scaffold is going to help you with that. I'm going to send this to a couple of people that we have. We've actually had people. A lot of our tenants right now are using Helm, and a lot of them are looking at alternatives. And I think this is an interesting one to look at for just like their inner dev loop sort of stuff.
Awesome. And if you have questions, put them in chat. If I miss it, ask again. This is interesting. So I put this one, the CNCF, Google has given, had a grant that said it was a $9 million over 3 years for the CNCF to help with infrastructure. Thanks, Google. But you are knee deep in this stuff. Can you give us an insight? Like, how many, do we know how many instances, how big is this? What happens when we're doing a pull request? Like, how much stuff are we building? I know Tim Hawking has kind of hinted at that it is a lot of stuff.
It is.
And I'm just way interested in knowing, how many times how many times are we building Kubernetes every day?
I mean, it's not just the building stuff, right? Like Google Cloud has a whole bunch of services. One of them would be like GCR, where containers are stored. And all of that stuff happens in Google Cloud right now. That's where the infrastructure has historically been, and this is just kind of keeping the lights running. There's a lot of stuff that's still moving over from Google hosted infrastructure to community hosted infrastructure. Where
tell me a bit about this. Sorry to interrupt you because I was hoping you would go to this. Tell me a little bit about what's happening here with like the infrastructure as far as who owns it, and because the project itself is going to start to take on this burden, right? And I want to make sure that we talk about that working group.
Yeah, I think the real key differentiation is that when Kubernetes was in its infancy and evolving, a lot of the infrastructure was in Google controlled accounts. We do the same. When I worked at Microsoft, we did the same kind of thing. There were Azure controlled accounts that some open source things were in, and really what's happening here is that the control of those things is being given to not the control of those direct things, but things are being migrated to accounts that are controlled by the community, so funded by the community. There's money that comes into that. I think there's still work to go there. We actually had one of the problems that led to our CI signal kind of flub was there was a project in Google that was still hosting images, and somebody deleted it because they weren't sure if it was still being used or not, and it had to be restored, and that's another thing that needs to be transferred to the community. So really what this is funding and giving them credits to use that infrastructure. But when you submit a pull request and you see all the tests pop up, that's all happening on clusters, running in clusters on Google infrastructure right now.
Yeah, and Joe's saying it seemed a good idea at the time, and this is just one of those things where we've been talking about this migration and doing it for so long. And there's a working group that I think you want to mention. Yeah, that's always looking for volunteers.
Working group Kate's infrastructure, great place to go for that. I mean, it's a big effort, right? There are so many things involved. When you think about the scope of what needs to be tested for Kubernetes, when you submit a pull request, there's tons of jobs that test all kinds of features. It's very complicated, and definitely could use more eyes and more help. I think it's an underserved area. It's not super flashy, right? People don't think, oh, let's make CI better.
Yeah, this is a quick one. I found this. I run into kubectl cheat sheets all over the web all the time. This is the sheet, and this one is so thorough. I can't even begin to talk about it. But I thought this would just be a cool link here in the notes. Shout out to Eon01, whoever you are. That is definitely a very thorough one, and I always dig that. This one is cool. The CNCF actually has a transparency report now about the KubeCon Cloud Native Con, so you can come in here and see how many people registered, attendance rate. And I just thought that was really interesting. I think it's really cool that the CNCF is kind of, opening up the books there to kind of show us these events, because I know it could be frustrating to attend a virtual event and wondering, is anyone even watching? And apparently with 22,000 registrants, someone is definitely watching. So this is really good, right? It's good to see it's almost split gender wise. We always try to. I've helped select talks at KubeCon, and we're always looking for new speakers and things like that. And I think it's just really great that the CNCF is making this information available so that we can all get better at it. So I think that is dope. And then lastly, we have a link here from someone in chat. What is this? K0S, the Kubernetes distribution. I'm always curious of who's trying to do the most clever one, because you got micro K-s, K3S, K0S.
Can we get to -1?
So look, container D out of the box. See, already solving problems for you. So yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. I haven't played with this myself. I don't know anything about it, so I can neither endorse nor criticize, but definitely something to check out. Thanks to whoever dropped that in the notes. Okay, now on to the meat. 1.20. Jeremy, what are you into? The first thing you talk about is non-inclusive language in kubeadmin.
Yeah, I think there's tons and tons of stuff to talk about in the project, but I really think this is a great one. There's a whole lot of work happening in the community to address non-inclusive language. There's a whole initiative that's been formed around it. This one, I think, is just cool to see come in 1.20. And really what's happening here is a new label and a taint were added to kubeadmin for the things that are going to be control plane nodes. So right now there is a master node label and taint. There's a new one called control plane, which makes it more clear what it is, and it's much more inclusive language. So the things that are there will continue to exist for a little while. There's in the KEP or in the issue, it kind of walks through what phases are going to happen there. But I think this is just a great feature, a great thing to come in. It's not going to break anybody right now, but it's going to fix a problem, right? Like it's a problem to have that kind of language associated with these projects. And I think it's just really cool to see that coming in.
Yeah. And I've always felt control plane is a better description anyway, be more explicit, be more, is also really great. Also shout out to the Kubernetes GitHub administration team. Yeah, we have one, who's been working diligently with GitHub on, main and master in GitHub itself, because that's definitely a lot of work and to make sure that it doesn't disrupt things. So big shout out to that. That is working group naming. Quick George pro tip. If you go to Google and you type Kubernetes, oh goodness, sigs.yaml, you will end up at this page. And there is actually a public facing page that is much better than this, but you will end up in this place. And in this, you will find all the SIGs, all the working groups, all of the repos that they own, what they own, when their meetings are, a link to their meeting notes, and all sorts of goodies. And we're going to get into a little bit more pro tips like this. But this is how you kind of find out where working groups are, who looks at them if you actually go to the rendered page here. And we're going to talk a little bit about the contributor site in a second. Oh, no, that was a spoiler. Okay. People are asking in chat, what's happening with PSPs?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that I called out down here is that perma beta is kind of going away. There are a whole lot of things that have been in beta forever, right? PSPs is one of those. Ingress was one of those things as well, but Ingress has gone GA now. So what's happening with PSPs? I think it's open to debate what's going to happen. SIG security has taken up the mantle. So Tabby and Ian are definitely looking at what can be done to push that along. They will be working on, with SIGAuth to kind of figure out what that looks like, what a replacement or an evolution looks like. The question really comes down to what's going to happen to features that are beta now. In 1.19, there was a policy change, a KEP that came in.
This one's important. Everyone pay attention to this one.
It really says that things have to progress within 3 releases. If they don't progress within 3 releases, so say you have like V1 beta 1, it needs to either go to like V1 beta 2 or whatever, some new beta version, and then you have to deprecate the old one, or it needs to graduate to stable GA, or it needs to be deprecated. And then the deprecation train kind of runs for that automatically.
Right, the timer starts, right?
The timer starts, yeah. Okay. It's pretty cool too, because as new features are coming in, they have to have these these flags basically added into the code so that it becomes automated. You can start to report on some of these things too. Another one that came in with 1.19. So those things take effect in 1.20. So starting in 1.20, if you've delivered a beta thing, the clock is running.
Ah, okay. So see, because someone said Ingress is GA, I was like, dude, it's what?
It is, yeah.
How long was it in beta?
It was in beta forever. There are a whole lot of
things. Anyone know? Audience, anyone know? I want to say
single digits. Yeah. I mean, along those lines, cron job has been beta since 1.5. It's a nuts time frame for those things to be around. So those things are going to go either to stable or to go away. And PSPs falls into that bucket. PSP has been beta for a long time, and nothing has really pushed it along. Another one that we use all the time. So we use PSPs on my team and something called pod disruption budgets all the time. And PDBs are another one that have been in beta for quite a long time. So they both basically have a death clock on them now. Things are added to the code. And
we call it that. Someone write down death clock. We're going to make that an official term. The reason I've been kind of like poking at you to say these things is for the first time ever, deprecations, removals, and getting stuff from alpha, beta to GA are all on a clock now, right? There is no thing that lingers anymore. Is that an accurate statement?
So the policy applies to beta things. Alpha things can stay in alpha, and you can do versions of them. And I mean, really, that's what should happen, right? Like things that are the important thing with beta is that they're on by default, so people start to depend on them. The alpha things,
good to know.
they're not on by default, right? So you could put them in, make changes. Like dual stack IPv4 and IPv6 support is alpha. It was delivered in 1.17, maybe.
Okay.
A new version of it has come in 1.20. They've rewritten a whole bunch of it, and it's still alpha. To use it, you have to turn it on. The beta things are on by default, so you're going to get them. And when there's a change to it, there's a change to it, and people really do depend on them. We just upgraded all of our clusters at my day job to 1.16. Like that's how far behind we are. And there were so many people that were still using these deprecated like deployment versions, and because it's not a priority for them to use it, and they just kind of build that into their workflow.
So question for you, just from a philosophical point, why is our beta opt out instead of opt in for features? I'm sure someone made that decision at some point.
I think it's to start getting feedback, you want to really ensure that these things are being used and exercised. When they're turned on by default, they also go through all the testing flows. When things are alpha, like they're excluded. I think that just having them on by default just gets them on that path to, especially with this new policy, gets them on the path to getting that thing stable and making
little fire to excellent.
Some pressure.
Speaking about fires, we want to talk about this one. Another favorite of yours that you had, fixing kubelet exec probe timeouts.
Yeah,
you got to tell me this one.
This is a great one. Turns out that if you have exec probes and you specified a timeout, it wasn't honored. If you didn't specify a timer, it wasn't honored. It would just run until completion. So the default is 1 second. In 1.20, this was fixed. So it's really like a bug fix, but it's a pretty impactful bug fix.
Right.
So it's actually put behind a feature gate. It's on by default, but if you have problems, like you've defined an exec probe and no timeout, it's going to take 1 second. We actually had some folks from Microsoft pop in that work on the AKS engine, and we had a lot of discussion about whether this was the right way to go or not. Signode, ends up having the call, and they push this one forward. But like the AKS team or AKS engine team had some tests that used exec probes, didn't specify a timeout. So suddenly they upgraded to 1.20, and oops, these things take longer than 1 second. So this is just a good one to be aware of. I think one of the themes I saw as the release was happening is that a lot of things are going to stable, and there's a lot of focus put into fixing things of the past and just making the project better overall. And then this is an important one, right? Like when you're running these exec probes, like it probably makes sense to have a reasonable timeout on these things so that you have an assurance that the probe is actually working and not just hanging out forever.
So when you're releasing, like, do you have a meeting where it's like, this is technically a bug fix, but it also changes expected behavior? Like, do you have like a special, like, is there like a little flag that you wave that says, this one is a, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so like the release team doesn't really have that kind of power. We're enabling everybody to deliver these things, and it really comes down to the SIGs that are responsible for this code. So in this case, this is a Signode thing, and Signode had a lot of discussions about it. When you click through this issue, you can find the pull requests, and there's lots of discussion that happen on a lot of these things. They give you a lot of context. I think even with the Docker shim one, on the KEP, so these things all come from KEPs, right?
We'll get to KEPs. We'll get to KEPs. Yeah.
There's so much discussion that goes on these things that you can get a lot of great information, a lot of context on if you know where to find them. And there was a lot of great discussion back and forth on this one. I think in the end, like it is impactful because it's fixing something that people probably came to depend on or just didn't know they were depending on, which is cool. Like the feature flag is there. You can set it to get the old behavior back, which will go away eventually too, to kind of get you on the path. But just a good one to be aware of, I think. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say a question from the audience if you're ready.
Yeah.
Waleed has, how do you know which SIG it will be for a specific resource/feature?
Yeah, that's a question that you can answer a couple of ways. One, you can kind of think of the functionality. So if it's something that relates to the kubelet behavior, that's going to be Signode. If it's something that relates to like the cron job, for instance, that would fall under apps. But really the way to do it is to look at the KEPs. They're going to be like the source of truth for everything, and they have an owning KEP. So like every feature or enhancement that comes into the project is going to land with some owning SIG. And I think like for PSPs, maybe you're asking that as a follow-up question, that's owned by SIG Auth right now. SIG Security, I think, is newer, but the original PSP implementation was owned by SIG Auth. So you can find all the SIG, like when you look at any given enhancement, it's like in this directory, the KEPs directory, or in this repo, the KEPs directory is where you'll find all the things that are merged.
Here we go.
And,
Here we go.
You can pick any one of the SIGs. They're all organized by SIG. Some of it does predate, as Joe mentioned, predate
Yeah.
KEPs. KEPs are a newer thing.
Yeah.
Most everything that was like a design proposal before that's continuing to evolve, like it wasn't ready to go GA or beta, we're actually requiring all of those things to be updated into KEPs. So there's older things that are migrating into that new format, but there definitely are things that are outside of that scope. So you can find, you can find.
Here we go.
Here's the Docker shim one.
So
there's two pieces in here. There's the README file that's markdown. You can find a ton of stuff in it, and then you can find a keps.yaml file, because like everybody loves YAML.
Yes.
And this has metadata in it, and it'll show you like who the authors are, who's responsible for doing the reviews, and then also like the owning SIG and the participating SIGs.
Excellent.
So you can find like tons and tons of great information in these things. Spoiler for like a few minutes later, we're working on making a lot of this stuff more transparent and easy to find.
Yeah, Joe's finally going to get his KEP website. So there's a reason I wanted to talk about this specifically, because as I was reading the Docker shim news, you read on the internet, people saying comments, why did they do it this way? Why did they do it this way? And if you actually drill down, there is a KEP for it. And if you find the issue in the thing, you could read it and you can actually see the maintainers talking about all the things that people were talking about. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is this repo, and I know some of you out there have Kubernetes or DevOps or something in your job title, and I cannot tell you how much time you can save by learning just this repo and how to keep track in here. Now, we don't want to send people to raw GitHub repo, so one of the things that we've been working in for a long time, and this is way too complicated, is this should be a website. You should be able to go to KEPs, Kubernetes.io, search, see which ones are open, click a little SIG label, which ones are assigned to me, which one are assigned to them, where's the discussion at, cross-linking to the GitHub issues. Definitely hear you on that. And there are people who are working on doing that. Do you give us any insight on that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's actually an open issue to create a KEPs website, extracting some of this metadata out and building it into an easy to use sort of site. I dropped a link to that in the notes.
Awesome.
I think there's like two paths really. If you're just interested in like a summary of information, that will definitely be the place to go, especially as we start to mature the process around collection of KEPs for releases, which is another one that I linked. If you're interested in collaborating on any of these things, though, like the GitHub repo is totally the way to go. You can find like when pull requests are open to move one into from provisional to implementable different states.
Let's see what you got. 122 already.
Yeah, there's lots of them that are open. And when you come in here, you can do like a code review for this feature, right? Like in the KEP, it's going to define all kinds of stuff like known issues or risks, mitigations. Defined test plans, use cases, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And this is really your opportunity to come and be involved in discussing some of these things and giving your input. Like my team's super interested in whatever the next PSP thing is going to be, because we're going to be using whatever it is. So we are super interested in following this one along, even though most of my team members aren't like super active Kubernetes contributors. This is just a great way for us to give our feedback as operators.
Yes,
to use some of these things.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I wanted to bring this up and spend some time on it, because there have been certain issues. I know certain things where I've heard developers say, "Oh, if I only got some real feedback on this from like someone who's using it in anger." So KEPs of 2021 is going to be what we're rallying around. And Stephen Augustus, if he's listening, he says he's going to try to drop by today. That's definitely one of his jams for the year. I'm going to add another one that I like to use, relnotes.kates.io. If you've heard of this, tell us in chat. If you haven't heard of us, I want to know. I want to know how good we are about sharing our obtuse URLs, because that's what we do. I'm actually working on kates.io/logo, so that like if you ever wonder if you ever need the shade of blue or the logo, it takes you to like the little marketing page. But so I dig this one for a few reasons. So first of all, this is one of those places where you don't need to be a distributed systems engineer. It's just a web front end. So if you don't, if you're looking for stuff to do and this is like what you do. You don't have to be scared about digging into something stuff. So we always kind of need people with all sorts of skills, front ends, documentation, whatnot. But what I like about this is that you can break it down by component. So you can say, you know what, let me look at cloud provider today. Okay, here they are. And then you can look at the notes. So I know it looks kind of crazy, kind of jank right now, but as you start to drill down into each of these labels, it kind of really gives you a good view of what's happening. So I use this actually in conjunction with the GitHub release notes that link to them. And then if I have questions, I can come in and you can drill one on each individually, and it'll take you to that pull request where you can sit there and you've got the entire history right there. So that is definitely awesome. I have a joke that I tell people is like, if the word architect is in your title, that enhancements repo and this thing, your jam, it should be on your list. So anyone else got any tips on this one? Oh, I'm glad and sad that it's the first time some of you have seen this. So that's good to go. But yeah, Jeff was working on this for a while. I don't know who's working on it now, but you can definitely like browse around here. There's all sorts of goodies. I see a KEP section. You don't think it's, well, show me the KEPs. That might be okay. All right. Oh, there's a KEPs label. Oh, okay. All right. Some work left to do. This one's just a malformed colon, I think, right? Am I right? Yeah.
Looks like it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is why you see some of this metadata on top of KEPs, because we need that stuff. So we, Joe famously said, "Hey, I'm gonna shove these through Hugo, and I'll be done in a weekend." And that was 3 years ago.
Yeah,
just
we're working through a lot of that right now with SIG docs and it takes a lot of people to make these things show up and be awesome.
Yeah, moving on. So we got exposing metrics about resource requests and limits that represent the pod model. What's this?
Yes, I think there's two cool alpha features that are coming in 120 or came in 120 around metrics. So this one is really about exposing a new metrics endpoint on the scheduler, so you can hit that with Prometheus or something else, and it'll give you a time series. It will show you the request limits for all the stuff running in your cluster. Give you a better idea. Selfishly, I want this because I'm a cluster operator. Gives you the like a better kind of holistic view of the cluster to do things like let's figure out capacity planning, or how are we doing with like actual utilization. So this one's pretty cool. I think it's an alpha feature again, so you have to turn it on with the feature flag.
Yep. And
there's a second one. If you've used the horizontal pod autoscaler before, you can get like pod metrics like CPU utilization and scale based off of that. But it's for the whole pod, which can actually be a little misleading, right? Like if you've got one container in there that's causing all of the problems, you might lose that because it might fall into an overall tolerance for the pod. So another alpha feature that's coming in 120 is the ability to do that just on the container within the pod. So you can say like, I really, really care about this Java application that maybe has a bad memory leak. Let's drive the HPA off of that instead of the whole pod. So I think like those two things together are pretty cool. Just like putting my cluster operator hat on, we've been dealing with a whole bunch of that stuff. And I think it's really nice to see these things coming in just to make it a little bit easier for people to run with.
Yeah, and I one of the things I like about the KEP structure is they tell you goals, non-goals, proposal. Like I feel like if you're an operator, like you could totally explain this to your boss in a way that can, hey, what's the TLDR on this, right? They got the user stories here, risk and mitigation, design details, and this is just now. If you're seeing this for the first time, I think now you understand why we do want to surface this and let the community, kind of be able to see all this stuff in a manner that's more useful for them. We've been hinting about this one a lot, moving forward from beta. What's this one about?
Yeah, so this was in 119, and this is just it's a blog post, and then I think we also linked to the actual KEP that like everything that comes in is a KEP, even policy things. And this is a blog post really giving you more details about that required transition from beta.
This is we're having a death clock KEP. Right. This is the def clock.
Yeah, it's the def clock clip. One of the things. So the first thing in there is that tags, including when an API was introduced, are now required. So that's the ability to do a lot of automation around this stuff. One that kind of goes hand in hand with this is Jordan Liggett added a feature or enhancement in 119 as well that will tell you when you're using deprecated APIs. So those can kind of go hand in hand, giving you a really good view about what's happening, helping you prepare for some of these things. So like the 116, like we had a big blog post about, oh no, there's a lot of things going away.
There it is. Helpful warnings ahead.
Yeah, this is a great one. So now you'll actually get back a header telling you, like when you do an API call, you'll get back a header that tells you if you're using that. It also generates metrics that you can scrape, which is super cool for cluster operators. When you're using kubectl, it's exposed as like a warning message. One of the problems we had with 116, our migration, was that a ton of people didn't know they were using these deprecated things, and there wasn't a great way to report them back. And then when you're trying to scan, like as a cluster operator, it's hard to know, like, because things get converted to preferred versions. Things maybe get stored in Helm releases, and you don't really know like what they actually sent. So this is nice because it's going to give you back some of that and give you a lot more information, a lot more visibility into like, I actually should not be using this thing. I should move on.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I really like when we did that. Okay, so let's see.
So along those lines, like, I think we're seeing this start to play out. Like, cron jobs have been around for a long time. And I remember back in, like, I think when I was the enhancements lead for 118, there was some discussion about whether cron job should go or should not go, should go or should not go. And the same thing in 119, should it go, should it not go? There's a lot of things that have to happen, I think, to make that one go to GA. And I think stepping stone for that is in 120, a new cron job controller was added. It'll be an alpha feature. You've got to turn it on with, with a feature flag, but it's going to start that process of getting you to the point where like cron job will eventually go GA. And I think all of these things are just building on top of the maturity of the project and pushing us in the direction of getting away from these things that may or may not go away, and give people real assurances that this thing that I'm depending on, this cron job or this deployment, will be around because it will be a stable thing eventually.
Yeah. And now that we're actually going through the KEP, this is nice. Here's what's coming in 120, 121, 122. Here's the plan. Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I really
like that one.
The KEPs are great. Like, if you go through and you have any questions about stuff, they're the place to go. If you're going to make a proposal for a new enhancement, like, there's a lot of stuff to write down, but it's good that there's a lot of stuff to write down because it's really forcing you to go through this great design process and think through all of the gotchas and, just build a more mature thing.
Yeah, and I feel especially, as we bring new contributors in, right? Why is the behavior for this feature like this, right? They have that without having to be an archaeologist, right? They have that context and they can spin up quicker, right? And then of course you'll be thanking your future self in a year when you're wondering why the cron job is acting slightly different from when it did before or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Good to know. All right. So we got a few other ones here, and then I'm kind of set for time here.
It's fixed.
I put the LGTM on it. Don't worry.
Nice. So when you're thinking about, like, I want to know dates about the release, or a link to the enhancement tracking spreadsheet, or any of the other stuff, who's on the release team, you used to have to go to the SIG release repo. So there's tons and tons of GitHub repos, right? Yeah. Now, on the Case contributor website, which is a super dope place to go for all kinds of stuff, if you go to /release, it will tell you all the information about the latest release. And it's pulling it from GitHub. So we make changes to the timelines, all that stuff will be reflected in this page. So you can go to this and you can say, when's the release going to be? 121 will be starting soon. So when that kicks off, probably the second week of January, this will be updated with all the information about the 121 release, the dates. You'll be able to see when do I need to have my code in by? When can I expect this release to happen? And instead of having to look about, go dig through GitHub repos again, like, there's just more information being surfaced in way easier to consume ways. But this is also showing you things like, when are the release meetings, if you want to come and listen to them, because they're all public.
Check this out.
Yeah, the TLDR of the schedule.
So I use this a lot, right? Because where it's like, oh, what day are we on or whatever, kates.dev/release. Myself and others, we've been trying to make rememberable URLs that you can put on a t-shirt. And this is the contributor site. We are going to talk about this a little bit, but another one is kates.dev and kubernetes.dev are obviously, those are aliases, so it's fine, but calendar is also one. It's another George pro tip. Will always take you to the calendar. Remember that YAML file that I showed you and it was like a hot mess? Here's an entire thing that has the calendar on it. And this is the kind of place where we're thinking KEPs with a search engine, and we put events on here. The contributor guide, this kind of stuff. So a lot of people, I'd like a big shout out to Bob Killen on this on this work here. But yeah, case.dev/release actually helped me find some things that I also want to point out to the crowd. This one will help you at work, I promise. Enhancement tracking sheet. What's that?
Yeah.
So if we click through, whoa, okay.
2 things for this one. Hopefully we're going to get rid of this starting in 122.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets are not anybody's favorite thing.
Surprise, cloud native spreadsheets.
Yeah, cloud native spreadsheets. So right now what happens during the release is people submit enhancements, whatever, they target them for a given release. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just have this issue running and they don't know they need to tell the release team that it's going to be in this, or they don't know that it needs to be milestoned. So what the release team does currently is comb through all of the open issues. So if you went to the Kubernetes enhancements repo under issues, there's a tracking issue for everything, right? And they comb through, and if you go look at any one of those things, you'll see pings from like the 117 enhancement team, the 118, whatever. Eventually it just becomes kind of this back and forth, and we extract information out of it and put it into the spreadsheet. So this will tell us what things are going to be in the milestone, what things. So at the beginning of the release, we'll see a whole bunch of things that are maybe tracked, things that are at risk. Maybe they don't have all the things done for their KEP that need to be done. There's different tabs too. Like this is the dashboard. It's showing you.
Yeah. I have my sharing button there, so I'm trying not to accidentally.
Yeah, I think at this point it's probably all tracked or removed from milestone. Like when we got to code freeze, if things didn't make it, they got removed from milestone.
Right.
So this is just right now is a great way to figure out what's going to be in the release, what's not, and kind of keep track of these things. It'll also really helpfully link you to because we have to keep track of that stuff for the release. It'll link you to like K website PRs if you want to read the docs or the actual implementations. But let's pause for a second. Spreadsheets are not the best way to work with this stuff, and the process we've been using to collect enhancements is super labor intensive, and it's front loaded for the release. So the enhancements lead in the shadows, and people that are like apprenticing to do that role have to spend a lot of time, and it's very, very easy to miss these things too. So one of the things we in the enhancements project under SIG architecture, put that hat on, we've been trying to think about how to make this process better. How do we, build off of what's been happening with the KEP process? So, like when you were scrolling through those things and it had like the risks and the mitigations and stuff, that's a markdown file. Right. It's not really easy to parse those things out with automation. Like you can, but it's free form text right now, right? There's also a KEP.yaml in there that's got stuff that's meant for tool consumption or for automation consumption. We want to do the same thing for the release process. So we have an open KEP that I linked into the notes that people can go actually get feedback on that we want to launch for 122. So we're going to, during 121, we're going to refine this, build some tooling around it. We call it the receipts process. So instead of people going back and forth in these GitHub issues where things can get really easily lost, inside of each one of the releases, so like for 122, there will be, or in enhancements, there will be a 122 release folder. And inside of that, you'll see the same kind of things that are represented here. So there will be proposed, there will be tracked, removed from milestone buckets. And then in each one of those buckets will be a small YAML file that basically gives you all the information that's in the spreadsheet. And it's cool because we'll be able to do a couple of things. Like we'll be able to validate the status of that KEP automatically. We won't have to go back and like dig through a bunch of things. We'll be able to look at the state. Is it provisional or not provisional? Sure. Is it targeted for this milestone? And if it's not, update the stuff for us automatically when it merges in. But the other thing that does is allow us to build a manifest of all the things that are in the release or removed from the release, whatever, that we can then turn into another website. We can augment the KEPs website, which is a separate effort. Like they're both kind of happening in parallel, but they're both aimed at doing the same thing, making this whole thing more transparent. But it'll allow you to say like really easily 122, what came in, 121 or 123, what's planned. And then you'll be able to go back historically and look at some of this stuff. And it'll be, I think, really nice for people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's great for those of you out there who are kind of like, you see what you're doing at work, right? And you're frustrated about your own tech debt and stuff. And here we are showing you our manually assembled spreadsheet, right? So like, don't feel bad, it's fine. We all have something to improve. So that the things are, I watch Kenny Coleman do this by hand, like he's sharing while he's working on it. And I was just like,
Yeah.
Wow.
Again, like shout out to Bob Killen. He added a whole bunch of automation into the spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet has like functions and it does a lot of automatic stuff.
Yeah. And Paul's like, hey, don't spend the whole episode on the spreadsheet. So we were doing that.
TGI sheets.
Yeah, we're definitely winding down here soon, but I do want to give it a few minutes here for the audience. If you have any questions for Jeremy or any release or any process at all, Sevi says, I suggest a contribution how-tos where to start episode in TGIK style, if not done before. Indeed, I know there's a lot of tour videos that we've been trying to do over time, and a lot of that is just lack of time. But if that's something that you want to tackle, definitely let us know, as in let Kubernetes know. So I'm using the term us somewhat interchangeably. I apologize. I just realized there's us here at TGIK, and then there's us in Kubernetes. We wear multiple hats sometimes, and this one's a confusing one for me. So does anybody have any, is there anything else you want to cover here 1.20 wise? Perhaps a wink pitch on how people get involved in helping
for 121. So just selfishly, I think the release team, I don't know if selfishly, but I think the release team is a great place to get involved if you haven't been a contributor before, or if you are a contributor and you've never kind of gone through the release process and you're interested in like how a sausage is made. There are two main roles on the team, or two like classes of roles. You have the release lead, and then you've got sub teams under that, and sub teams are led by a person. And each one of those sub teams would be like enhancements or docs or release notes. All of them are focused on doing, that one function that makes the release successful. Mm-hmm. And then each one of those teams has a number of shadows, and the shadows are really like those apprentices, and that's open to everybody. Anybody that's a contributor or new contributor, a GitHub or a Kubernetes org member or not an org member. There's an avenue for a lot of people to come in, no matter what your skills are. If you're a docs person, or you're really, really interested in CI signal, or you're kind of like a project manager kind of person, there's something to do on the release team. Mm-hmm. The shadow application process starts with a form. So there will be a form sent out probably next week.
Okay.
And on that, it'll ask you, it'll go to the Kubernetes dev website, mailing list. And then it'll also be posted in like SIG release on the Kubernetes Slack and some other places.
Yeah. Well, Walida is asking, like, how many sub teams are there?
On the release team, there are the enhancements team, the CI signal team, the bug triage team, and they really go through and like help us categorize what makes up the. This will help you out too. The release team, I think, is the one you want. Bug triage looks at like issues and PRs that have been opened and helps kind of ensure that they're being handled correctly. Comms helps write the blogs. So like the release blogs that come out after, they work with contributors to help write those things. There's a release notes team.
Here they are.
Yeah, there you go.
Comms, triage, signal enhancement. Hey, emeritus advisor. All right.
Yeah, that'll be me someday.
So how does it work? Is it like the previous release lead slots in, or is Lockie just like chilling there for a while?
No, it'll rotate. So for the 121 enhancement, or EA will be Taylor, who was the 118 release lead, only Doyle on Twitter. Super great guy to work with. He was the lead for 119. I enjoyed working with him immensely. So he's going to be the EA. Generally, it's one of the previous release leads. He's actually the first one that's done it twice, I think.
Okay.
Previous to him was Tim Pepper. And then, so there's a few people that haven't done it yet. Hopefully.
Krickenberger, I think, in the past, and Burkus.
Yep, Burkus has done it.
That right? Yeah. Okay.
So it's just a great way to come back and help, share what you've learned, be an advisor. And one of the great things they do is help to run the shadow program. So making sure that the shadows are getting what they need out of it, helping us course correct during the time. I think there's probably 4 or 5 people that get picked to be shadows for each one of those roles. So when the when the shadow app comes out, you can pick which. I think you can submit to 2, and it'll give you the opportunity to write why you're interested and give us a little bit of background. Yep. And then those team leads plus the EA will help select that team. Mm-hmm. I think I see in the release or in the chat, Waleed asked, how do you share lessons learned with the next release?
Yeah, tell us about the retro process. Yeah, and then I'll finish it up with the contributor guide, and then we'll start to wrap it up, unless you have a really interesting question. And
Yeah, so the retro is the last kind of artifact or ceremony of the release process, and it's one of my favorites because you do a retro, you figure out like what works, what didn't work. This time around, we really tried to embrace asynchronicity and be more inclusive of time zones. So, like generally in the past, the release leads have all been in the US, most likely on the West Coast, whereas the people on the team have been kind of distributed. In 121, I think an awesome thing is the lead is going to be Nabarun, and he's in India. So it'll be the first person to lead a release outside of the US.
Interesting.
To really make that happen, we can't expect everybody to meet at the same time, right?
Sure.
11:30 p.m. for him if we do the same times as normal. So one of the things we did this time around was kind of split into time zone centric things, and then did async handoffs between the teams.
That is great.
That worked pretty well. We tried using HackMD for a while. We tried using Google Docs for a while to capture stuff. We tried using both for a while. Turns out like using both is not a great idea. So, in the retro, we talk about a lot of those things, and we write down like what we want to continue doing. We open issues to really like go fix things, like go update the handbooks. If you're interested in shadowing, while we're back on that topic real quick, in the SIG release repo, maybe it's linked off of here, there are handbooks for each one of these roles, and it tells you exactly what you do. So it'll give you a really great idea. Like what do I do during week 2? What do I do during week 4? I think there's great sources of information, even if you're not going to shadow and you just want to know more about the process. They're really great sources of info.
Yeah, awesome. And with that, the last question was, how do I get started? Kates.dev, and then click on docs and /guide. This is a great place to get started, actually, because I'm always looking for help on this guide. This is one of the first major things I worked on with people, and there's always room for improvement for everything. I'm proud of it, but there's always things you can with improving that. We're going to wrap it up. Jeremy, we thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody here, we really appreciate you coming out and taking the time. What does the future hold for me? Yeah, if you're following me on Twitter, I am moving on from VMware, but similar to Duffy, the Kubernetes community is a family, so I am not expecting to actually go somewhere different. I will be involved in the Kubeflow community here in the future. So stay tuned for that, but you will definitely see me at KubeCons and coming to hang out. And there's a lot of good VMware stuff happening in 2021. Don't worry, Joe, I won't spoil it, but we got really great people here. And just a big shout out thanks to the audience, like being here in TGIK, being in the background, gathering the news links, and just my job is kind of sit there and watch chat and just see you all learning and supporting each other and just really forming a great community. And then when we actually go to physical KubeCons, getting to meet you and talk to you and stuff has just been a fantastic experience. And I know all the other hosts, past, present, and future, feel the same way. And at that, what do y'all think about Jeremy? I don't want to socially pressure him to host a future TGIK, but I just say, Joe, wink, wink,
Gotta pick up the segment and responsibility.
So really glad that you all listened in. I know this was a format change. Let us know if you like it. Do we add more of these? Do you want only tech stuff? Should we bring in different things? We're always looking to improve the show, as this is like episode 140 or 150 or something. We've done a lot of these, so we're getting, we're getting. I don't want us to get too comfortable, So we're definitely always looking at your feedback. So with that, thank you very much. Thanks to Paul Czar in the background doing. Paul was really upset you were on the spreadsheet for way too long, man. He's like, dude, move on from the spreadsheet. You don't want to scare him. So with that, happy holidays to those of you celebrating with that. TGIK is out, and we're done for 2020, in case that's not obvious. And we definitely look forward to seeing you in 2021. So with that, cheers, everyone. And remember, it's Friday. Don't touch anything in production, right? Have a good time, everyone. Jeremy, say bye.
Everybody, thank you.